there, this is Toulouse in southern France, the fourth largest city of France. The central Toulouse train station is right over there, and the bus station, I arrived there yesterday coming from the Pyrenees Mountains of Andorra. I am only here for 2 nights, 1 full day. Tomorrow I am catching a flight to a new country for me, and so I just wanted to give a little taste of Toulouse here and France. This is the only couple of days I'm spending in France, at least at this time. We'll see, maybe later in the summer. This is my 3rd time to France, and so I have seen quite a bit of the country. I spent a month here when I was 18 years old in the summer of 1990, and I will tell a couple of stories from that trip for something to talk about as I'm walking along here. So I'm walking into the historic center of the city this way, and I'm going to go to the Pont Neuf. So pont means bridge, and neuf, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is 1 to 10 in French. I know very little French, but know a few words. So neuf, 10, neuf. Neuf is 9, Pont Neuf. And so that sounds like the 9th bridge, but actually, to the best of my understanding, then it actually means new bridge. And I actually have a story of mine about the new bridge, the Pont Neuf, even though this is the first time that I've been to Toulouse here. So I will explain that story as I walk along here, and things are going to get a lot more interesting and beautiful up ahead, but I wanted to kind of fill the gap here of this more modern, although some of these buildings are obviously older buildings, and then some newer, and newer oftentimes means uglier, unfortunately. Newer building up there, but this big wide street, and then up ahead, then it will get to narrower lanes and really pretty old historical buildings and stuff. So my story of the Pont Neuf. So there is also a Pont Neuf in Paris, and I've been to Paris a few different times, including when I was 18 years old. I was also there 2.5 years ago, the last time that I was in France. I just went to Paris in the winter for a week. But I was there when I was 18, and I passed through Paris, I think, 3 different times. And the last time, then it was the end of my summer of traveling in Europe. My first time out of the country. I was 18 years old and spent the entire summer traveling around Europe. Went to 10 countries, hitchhiked in a bunch of different countries all over the UK, and actually in the Pyrenees of southern France here, hitchhiking through the mountains. And so it was the end of my trip, and I was flat broke. I had just barely enough money left to cover just like buying food at grocery stores and stuff for the last few days. I had a flight out of London like 4 or 5 days later, and I was back in Paris again, coming from elsewhere in Europe. And so I decided to sleep out on the streets of Paris. I'd actually done it once before, another time that I passed through, I guess the second time, sort of slightly different circumstances. Basically, I didn't find a place to stay in time, and all of the hostels were full up or something. It was like late at night, and I ended up walking around trying to figure out where to stay, and slept on the Place de la Concorde roundabout, which is right near the Champs-Élysées in Paris, a like central location. And there's a statue in the middle of it, a obelisk, actually, a Egyptian obelisk, and like a platform around it. And so I slept on that platform. But anyways, that is the second time that I was there. I'm talking about now the last time that I was there, and the Pont Neuf. And so I was trying to decide where to spend the night on the streets once again and decided maybe I wouldn't sleep on the streets, but instead would stay by the Pont Neuf bridge, because there's an island there. The bridge goes over the Seine River, and the bridge like stops, or doesn't stop, but it's anchored on a island in the middle of the Seine River. And then you can actually walk off the bridge and go down these steps and get on this little island, and there's a park there. And hang out in the park and, you know, read or whatever, and watch the river flow by. And so I went to that park and hung out there for the evening, reading a book. I think I was reading Les Miserables at the time. I read that book that summer. Incredible book, very long, set in France. Fictional story, but a incredible story about the French Revolution. All right, so see if I can get across. So here it turns into this really cool area of more walking streets and cafes, and Toulouse here is a university city, and so you can just kind of feel like there's a lot of young people around and students, and it just has such a different feel from Paris. It feels a lot more authentic, like kind of a more real France. I know that people like take issue with saying one place is more real representing a country than another place, but that's just the feel. Is there's definitely way less tourists around. I'm not really sure who's a tourist and who isn't, but normally you can see who is the tourists and who isn't. Like, who's carrying a camera? Me. And so it just has a very different vibe to it than the you know, main touristy areas of Paris or elsewhere. I know very little about this city, just kind of learned a little bit, but I like it. And it's going to get even nicer as I continue going this way and get deeper into these smaller lanes. So this is very strange. There is what looks like a body under there, and I'm going to assume that it's some stunt. What the heck is going on here? Unless it's like a statue, or I hope this isn't like a dead guy and everyone's just like pretending like, aha, here we go. Figured it out, I think. There's this fisherman and a wire, so it's obviously some art installation, and either this guy is getting air through the wire, but it doesn't look big enough, or it's just a dummy, obviously, because I totally hadn't noticed the fisherman. It blends in, but obviously that is not part of the original statue there. Very strange. And so I was in Paris, on that island, next to the Pont Neuf, which there in Paris also means the New Bridge, and it is actually the oldest bridge in Paris. So kind of ironic, but it was new when it was built, as things usually are when they're first built. And I spent the evening there on the island and was planning to sleep there in the park, and then I decided maybe it would actually be safer to be up on the bridge, because there was a area, like a platform area there, next to where the cars were driving by, but that the cars weren't driving on, like the walking area, and then a wider platform. And I thought maybe sleeping in the park was a little too kind of in the dark, and it would be better for me to be kind of more out in the open, so to speak, which turned out to be incorrect on my part. And so I went back up to the top of the bridge and laid out my camping mattress, because I had a tent and camping mattress, on the stone next to a statue of a guy on a horse who was some historical figure. And there was a little metal railing around the statue. And I tied my backpack, my big backpack, just the straps of the backpack to the railing to make it kind of more secure so that it couldn't disappear on me. And then I laid down on the camping mattress with my sleeping bag. And I went to sleep. I used my day pack, my smaller day pack, as a pillow, which was a lucky thing. And I woke up in the morning and my backpack was gone, my large backpack with all of my clothes and my tent, and I think my camera was not in there, but all of my traveling gear. And so someone had untied it, not that difficult, from the little railing, and taken off with my backpack. And I was left with my day pack, which fortunately had my wallet and passport and my flight ticket. This was the old days, you know, even before the internet. And your flight ticket was like cash, like you needed that to get on the flight. And so I had my flight ticket and the last of my cash, passport, I think my camera. And so I was pretty devastated, but at least I was able to get back to London. I still had enough money to barely get, you know, get there and pay for my food and stuff. And then I had a friend in London that I stayed with, and things worked out, but it was still a pretty bad experience. But just one of the risks of traveling, and you know, sleeping out on the streets is not the best idea, obviously, but you know, sometimes you do risky, adventurous things, and usually they work out, and sometimes they don't. So I wouldn't say, you know, never sleep out on the streets of Paris, you know. Could be a interesting, mind-opening experience, and probably you won't get robbed. All right, let's get over to the Pont Neuf, the other one, the Toulouse Pont Neuf. A main square here, obviously. And I think this way to the right. I walked this way yesterday. And so I'll tell another story from that trip in France, since I'm here in France. I spent a month altogether exploring around France of my 4 months that I was traveling in Europe on that trip. And so the previous summer was kind of the summer when my travels really began, because I went to Hawaii on a vacation with my mom and younger brother, a week-long trip that my mom paid for as a high school graduation gift. And later in that summer, then I did a outward bound backpacking wilderness course for 3 weeks that included rock climbing. And so it was a group thing, like 20 or so, mostly young people, being led on this backpacking trip through the Sierra Nevada wilderness of California, which is the area that I'm from. And there were 2 instructors, one of whom was from England. And so I was camping in France the next summer when I was 18 in 1990 in the Mont Blanc area, White Mountain. I think it's the tallest mountain of France, or at least a very iconic one. Let's check this out. Japanese restaurant. I guess this is probably the main cathedral, although I don't see a cross on top. And so, as I said, then I had a tent with me on that trip when I was 18 in Europe. And I went camping at a campground near Mont Blanc. This has got to be a cathedral, just the cross is, the front is up there, so. And that is blocked off, so I think I'm just going to head back. The streets over here are more interesting anyways. And so I stay at this campground, and it was kind of a like loosely organized campground in which people just put their tents all over the place, as I remember it. There weren't really like designated like specific sites. And so I stay there for the night, and I wake up in the morning and get out of my tent, and there are 2 guys in a tent, or like standing next to their tent next to mine, and I'm kind of like all blurry-eyed and just waking up, and then I look over and it's one of my instructors, a British guy from my outward bound backpacking course a year earlier, the previous summer. And he just happens to be camping there at Mont Blanc as well, in the tent right next to mine. So that was really cool. As you can see, so many street side cafes and restaurants. That is the European way. such a nice atmosphere. That looks good. It is about 8 in the evening and it is still hot. Yesterday was 102 Fahrenheit. That's about 38 Celsius. And today was, I think, almost as hot. But cooling down a little bit now at least. And up ahead here is the river. I think it's called the Garonne. And the Pont Neuf. Wow, look at this scene here. And there is the Pont Neuf right there. I think I'll go ahead and walk down here. Got some juggling going on. And so the Garonne River and the Pont Neuf, the new bridge, which I think is around 400 years old. So just a little taste of Toulouse here. Tomorrow hopping on a flight to my 67th country. See ya.